All right, everybody, good afternoon and welcome to the stream. I am Sean Colleen, and for those of you who've been following along the past couple of streams, we have been going ahead and building a tool to manage and help sunset some GitHub repositories. So we've tentatively called that tool KonmaRepo, and I'm going to go through a brief recap. I did some stuff offline on in between streams, and so I'm going to go ahead and go on a recap of what we've done since the last stream, catch us up to speed, and then we're going to go ahead and add some caching to some of the GitHub calls that we're currently making, and then from there we're going to go ahead and see if we can't go ahead and actually start to archive a repository, which is the goal of this tool. So all right, with that said, let's go ahead and jump into the project. Okay. All right, here we are. So where we last left off, I'm actually going to go walk through the GitHub history here, the Git history of the project. So where we last left off, I believe we had introduced some unit tests. And so I actually have done a few things since then. So we organized our solution, we reorganized our solution, and we added a solution to the project. Previously it was just a CS proj file, so we added our web project and our unit testing project to the solution file, and we had updated our Docker file so that now it's running the tests that we have alongside our repository, and it's doing all that good stuff. So from there, what we did is I added a couple more fields here, and so actually our GitHub service now is handling the star count, whether it's archived or not, the fork count, the open issue count, and this is just mostly us pulling from the GitHub client, the Octokit GitHub client, into our own object that we're going to be able to make use of. So after that, I actually went ahead and I added the tables and some icons and some visuals to the project. And so what that'll do is it'll actually give us the visual of the repository list and the information about it. And I'll take you on a tour of what I did. But in short, I added a font awesome for some icons. I added the actual table itself and some labeling. And don't worry, I'll start this up and I'll show you what we've got so far as well. But I also added Humanizer, which is a fantastic library for printing out text based on values or being able to format things in a way that's really nice and accessible for an audience, whether you want to pluralize something or make something singular or format numbers in a certain way or convert from metric to imperial and so forth. Oh, hey, Kevin's here. Hey, Kevin, great to see you. Very happy to have you on board with us. Thanks for stopping by. For those of you who don't know, Kevin, he's streaming all the time on great topics around .NET, and Kevin and I have known each other for quite a little bit now, and he's also one of the co-organizers of RevolutionConf down in Virginia Beach, which was a fantastic time for me to get to participate in that. So really happy to have you with us on the stream, Kevin, and definitely looking forward to your questions and your helping me out when I inevitably get stuck. All right, so I added the Humanizer. Now you can see that I added something like 1,600 files here, and most of that is just font awesome. So we'll go ahead and start up and show you what we've done with the Razor, and some Razor functions and things like that to make the things look a little nice. I added some stuff to the README in terms of actually checking off some of the items on our roadmap. I had missed an icon ending in our Razor page, so I fixed that, and then I added the date that things were pushed to in the table as well. So that's the basic diff of things, but let's go ahead and look at what we've got here. Now you'll notice that I'm using, even though my IntelliSense doesn't appear to like it, it does actually work, as we'll see in a moment. What I'm doing is we'll go back through everything here. So now in my home controller, I'm still calling my GitHub service there, and it's getting all the repositories from my organization. We're giving a logger, and we're still returning the view. The view here, my index view, is using Humanizer to go ahead and do some of that conversion. And then we've got, I'm using a function here within my Razor model, and this is going to let us actually create the table. I have two different tables that I'm using, and I want them to be the exact same format, and I got tired of editing the Razor in two places to make it work. So since we're using the list of archived repositories and then also of non-archived repositories, this should allow us to get going on that and use the standard visualization there. So I'll walk through, even though there's a lot of red squigglies, let's see if we can't ignore that for a minute. I'll walk through what we're doing. So I'm using some Bootstrap classes here. They come shipping out of the box with the Bootstrap that comes with .NET Core MVC. So I'm saying it's a striped table. The table header is going to be dark. I have one column that is for an icon, and you'll see I'm either going to use a locked icon or an unlocked icon, whether or not that's public or private. I will have the repository name. I have the number of stars and forks and issues, and I'm using icons to indicate those. And I've got the date the repository was created, the date it was updated, and the date that the repository last had changes pushed to it. And then for each data row here, I'm inserting the appropriate data cell, whether it's the locked icon or the unlocked icon. I also format it with the success and danger, because we want to call attention to if a repository is public, you may not want to sunset it, or you may want to give it additional consideration before sunsetting it. And then we have the description here. We actually show the name of the repository, but if you mouse over it, you'll get the description of the repository. We show the counts of those various items, stars and forks and open issues. We have the actual date if you hover over one of these date fields, but in the actual text for the date, you'll humanize it, so you'll see that it'll say like 5 years ago or 2 years ago or so on and so forth. Same thing with the amount of pushed. Now, also, the push date is a little bit different than the other dates here. Every repository has a created date and an updated date. Not every repository has a push date. It's actually a nullable value. And so how I dealt with that here is I wanted to make it very explicit that there might be something there or not there. And so I wanted to be clear. And so rather than doing a nullable value, let me show what I did here in my model. So we have, we'll take in that nullable value, that potentially null datetime offset for our push date. But I actually am using a construct. I installed the library of functional.maybe, and you can make this class on your own, but I like to pull into the NuGet package real quick and just not dealing with it. So that makes this into a maybe of datetime offset. Now I like that as a repository author, because so many times nullables get passed around everywhere, and it's not always explicit whether or not something might be null or whether or not you need to be concerned about that. And so I like to use the explicit maybe of datetime offset, and that just shows me later on that I can say whether something has a value or not. I can pull the value if I want to, but I like the explicitness of using a maybe construct where something may or may not contain a value, and you're aware of that and you acknowledge that, and you kind of want to give a heads up that someone should prepare for that. So back to our Razor page, we have if it has a value, we push the humanized piece, and then otherwise we push the text of never. All right, and that's it. That's the table. So then down here where we actually need to format the tables, I'm calling to my function with the non-archived repos and then with the already archived repos. So let's go ahead and I'll fire that up real quick just to show you what we have. Now, reminder, we're firing this up. This is running in Docker, and so it is being built. The Docker file is being built here, and then it's going to spin up. I'll probably have to bring this over from my other monitor, so once it shows up, I'll go ahead and do that. All right. Okay, so here's what we've got so far. So quite a bit different than where we left off last time. So right now, remember, the goal of this repository is going to be to surface the repositories that are in your organization, whether or not they're locked or unlocked or public or private, to show some quick stats about those repositories as a way of giving you some insight really quickly into whether you want to initiate an archive process or a sunsetting process for that repository. There's no button yet to do the actual archiving, so that's what I hope to get to building today. We'll see how far we get. So we see here, we can see that if we mouse over that, we can see it's a public repository, so it's showing as unlocked and red because we want to pay more attention to it there. If we mouse over the repository name, we get the description of what we were trying to do there. Our headers have the various titles there, so we can understand that. We can see these humanizer values. So these are going from the oldest repository, or the oldest updated, to the most recent. So we can start to see the change to 1 year ago, We can see 3-4 years ago, 11 months ago, and now, so the Humanizer is doing all of that for us in the background. All we're doing is providing a date time offset there and saying .humanize, and that's a fantastic library for that sort of thing. So I'm a big fan of that. So we can see here, for example, maybe I want to make it's a lot of repos here. Maybe I want to make a floating header. So if I can see here, for example, the number of open issues. If I scroll down to the bottom of this list again, part of my fast scrolling, pardon that, we can see that I've got 19 open issues on this repository. This is one that I happen to know about, and so I created this repository previously myself. So you can see that it's been updated 2 days ago. It was actually pushed to 8 hours ago, and it was created 4 months ago. So that one's fairly new. It's got 19 open issues, so probably not a candidate for archiving. So that's what we've got so far. So the next step is pulling this repository is great, but that makes a call to the GitHub API every single time. It takes a little bit of time. So if I was to refresh this page right now, I'll go ahead and hit enter. You'll notice that the refresh rate is probably not what we're looking for. And so one of the things we want to do here is see if we can't get that a little bit better. So I want to see if we can cache some of this stuff, especially because as an organization, generally speaking, you're not adding new repositories all the time. So I'm going to try and cache this stuff for let's say 24 hours. And so we're going to wrap our GitHub service in a cache there, and we're going to go ahead and see what we can do for that. All right, sound good? Great. All right, so for starters, I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And by the way, as I'm going through this on the stream, feel free to interrupt me. I'm interested to know if you've done stuff with Docker. And Kev, have you been doing anything with Docker or Azure recently? And I'm sorry if I haven't caught it on the stream. I'm curious as to whether what you've been up to these days with any of those tools. I'm gonna close some of this stuff. All right. So first up, go. Docker, all app services on Azure, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I wanted to Dockerize this because I knew I wanted it to be quick, and it's a pretty tiny thing, but app services on Azure is still a very standard way to go. That makes a lot of sense. But Kev, if you're interested in the Docker piece of it, we've definitely gone through building this in Docker, and actually it turns out that if you do Azure AD authentication and Docker on Linux, there's a problem with the out-of-the-box template, so we solved that as well. You've got to forward some HTTP headers on your own for that to work. So we solved that a stream or so ago. All right, so let's go ahead here. I'm going to go check out our repository. Oh, you know what? I almost forgot. I'm so sorry. This is, I'm forgetting my own patterns. I wanted to jump right into the code, and I forgot to mention two very important things. One is that this stream is enabled by my employer, and I'm actually doing this project to help us with some internal work right now. And so Excella, my employer, is actually allowing me to stream right now, which is fantastic. It's a great experience for me as I get some professional skills, and we get some open source work done, and sort of one of those win-win kind of things. And so I really appreciate being able to do that. So I've made the decision to make sure I give a shout out to Excella every single time that I do one of these streams. And the second part, and arguably the more important part, is that at the beginning of each one of these streams, we have been donating to a cause, specifically a cause around racial injustice. And so the past couple of recipients have been organizations like the Equal Justice Initiative and the Inclusive Innovation Incubator in DC. So today's donation recipient, specifically along the lines of police brutality and combating that, is going to be the ACLU. And so I've seen that them recommended by several folks in terms of organizations that make sense to donate to now, and specifically some of my friends and colleagues online who are Black have recommended donating to the ACLU around some of their work for this stuff. And so in addition to Equal Justice Initiative and the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Inclusive Innovation Incubator, we're going to add the ACLU to our donations list right now. And as I mentioned here, I'm doing, generally speaking, amounts of $20, $20 or $25 to each one, because this is my own money and I'm trying to get started, and hopefully we'll increase that donation amount. But I want to make sure that at least every time I'm doing a stream, I'm recognizing that that is a very privileged place to be in at this point in time, and I want to make sure that I'm at least doing some small part to combat some of the racial injustice that's happening in our society. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this donation now. I'm going to not sign up for those emails, but I'm going to go ahead and complete that. You all can see my email, that's okay. If you ever want to reach out to me, you can find me there. All right, now here's where I'm going to go away for 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and go back into to enter some secret stuff. So I will be right back as I fill out this donation form and get that submitted. All right, one moment. All right, and we're back, and we can see that donation has been completed. And so we're going to go ahead and get on with our code. All right, so by the way, I got access to this new UI for GitHub repositories, which seems really clean and nice. So I'm a fan of that so far. You can find files pretty easily. There's some, you can see really quickly the commits and the branches. It looks nice. It's a little shifted over to the left from where I'm used to it, and I found myself going back and forth a lot with the mouse to go to the issues screen, which reminded me, and I tweeted about this earlier, that actually GitHub has a keyboard shortcut menu. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift and question mark. In fact, I'm going to turn on Karnak again so you can see those keystrokes. If I hit Shift question mark, like that, what we can see here is that we have some actual navigation that we can do. So for example, to go to the issues, it's GI. To go to pull requests, it's GP. And so that's pretty cool. So I just want to go ahead and do that. So I'm just going to go to my issues and practice my keyboard shortcuts by using GI. Great. So now we can see I've added an item here of adding caching to cut down on the GitHub API calls. So one of the things that we are going to run into if we keep going on with this much longer is that each one of these calls is going to use up a little bit of our allowance for GitHub API calls within a certain time period. Now that's fine right now, because what we're doing is we're requesting all of the GitHub repositories for the organization. So even if we page through that, you're talking about roughly 3 or 4 calls. I think it may even count as 1 call currently. But certain other factors that we want, or certain other information that we want about our repository are going to require additional calls, and potentially 1 call per repository. So we're looking at that kind of thing. So if we have 300 repositories and we want to get, say, the number of watchers for that repository, that's going to be 300 additional calls, because you actually have to make that call per repository. And so now we're starting to really think about bumping up against an API limit if somebody's using this regularly. And so and it takes a long time to hit an API, certainly longer than it does to have it in memory. And these repositories aren't changing very often. And so we're going to start off by doing a cache. And so I added an item here, add caching to cut down on GitHub API calls. So we've got some explanation there, similar to what I just said. And so here I actually say creating an indefinite cache for the repository information. So actually, let's go for that for now, because I don't think we need to worry about the time limits so far. We'll figure out where those issues lie at the end. But for now, I think that as long as the server is running, we can assume that list is going to be correct. And I'm actually debating with myself. Let's go ahead and make it a 24-hour timeout. Okay, We'll also want to warm up that cache upon startup if we can, so actually load those items into memory and do that. And then we'll see about updating the cache with individual items. Like say if we archive a repository, we kind of want it to then show up in the archived list, so we'll figure out how to do that. And we'll also want an option to manually flush the cache. If someone's using this app, since it's an internal app, and someone's saying, you know what, I don't see the repository I want to refresh that, we want some kind of option to bust that cache. And so we'll probably do something very basic with a memory cache or something like that today. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on that. Now, first, before we do that, I get the number of repository views and the number of watchers. I want to make sure we say that depends on 29 there. So let's add a quick note to these tasks to say it depends on 29, which is that caching, our caching ticket here. Hey Alex, thanks for dropping by. I see you there in the stream. I appreciate you joining. All right. Great. So now that we've got that in place, we're going to go ahead and get started on this caching. So I'll go ahead and cut a branch and we'll begin. Oh, I meant to turn on some music as well, so we'll go ahead and see how that works out. I may turn it off if it kills my concentration, but we'll work on it. All right, so here we go. Add some music there. We'll see how it goes. We'll have some stuff in the background though. All right. Might even be a little low. Turn that up a little bit. All right, and for those of you joining or for those of you paying attention in the stream, feel free to let me know if you don't like the music, if you prefer for it to be a little different, next track, that kind of thing. We'll figure it out. Okay, well that's a little loud. I'm still new at this, folks, so getting things adjusted a little bit at a time. All right, let's go ahead and cut a branch. So this branch is going to be in support of issue number 29. I'll say add memory caching. All right, so I think what we're going to want to do is do this at the repository level here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take our GitHub service here. I'm going to create a cached GitHub service. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically wrap that GitHub service that we already have in place, and I'm going to go ahead and sorry, this music is not cutting it for me right now. See if we can find something a little bit more apropos. All right. Great. So, back to it. Okay, so we've got our GitHub service, right? But we probably want to do some kind of caching or wrapping to make sure that we've got that stuff going on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right. Sorry, it looks like my music may have cut off there. Technical difficulties. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop that for now. That's fine. We'll do music a little bit later. And thank you, Kevin, for saying this is Do What I Want. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. By the way, Kevin, you've been doing this for a while. In my stream chat, I see the users who are in the chat, but for example, like I see you and then like I see nobody else, but then people are commenting sometimes. Is that just the lag in the chat room, or is that the folks are chatting but not watching, or watching but not chatting? I mean, how do you have some insight as to how that chat is working? Because I like to chat with people, but sometimes I feel like by the time I respond, they're already gone. Maybe I'm just not that captivating. Don't trust it. That is okay. That's good to know. Thank you. Very, very good to know. All right. So let's go ahead. We've got our GitHub service, and we've been doing this, trying to do this at least in some sort of a unit-tested manner. And so let's go ahead and think about what we mean. Folks in the chat are here. That's always a good point, Kev. Yeah, if they're chatting and active, then they're here. Otherwise, we'll encourage them to chat and see if we can get them to hang out for a little bit. All right. So previously, so what we're going to want to do is create a GitHub cached GitHub service here. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. But first, we're going to do this. Try to do this in a test-driven manner. We'll see how that goes for us. So that's just because I miss I miss developing in a TDD manner. So let's see how that works. So I'm going to, again, for those of you who are just joining us or just picking up on this project, I'm using XUnit for my tests here. And so I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to test the constructor first. We don't have anything here yet, but I know that we're going to take in, oops, I know we're going to class. So I know we're going to want to take in our current GitHub service in order to cache it and do things based on it. So let's go ahead and reference that. So we're going to go ahead and say fact is, we'll know that we definitely want one of those. So public void with null GitHub service throws exception. All right, so the action is going to be, that we're going to take, is going to be to create a new cached GitHub service, which does not exist yet, so it's not going to work. That's fine. And then we'll say we'll pass in null, and then we'll say act.should. We're using fluent assertions here as well, so should throw an argument null exception, and the parameter should be GitHub service. We'll make the GitHubbers happy, and we'll capitalize that H there. Okay. So, looks like I'll do some line breaks there. So we've got that. Okay. So let's look at our ncrunch tests here. So ncrunch rate's failing to build, right? Because we don't have a GitHub service yet. That makes sense to me. So let's go ahead and create in our production code here a cached GitHub service. All right, and now we said that we wanted to take in a GitHub service. Public, so we'll cached GitHub service. We're going to take in an I GitHub service. And then we should be able to say, we'll create a backing field here. And for starters, we'll just we'll set it based on what's passed in. So this, look at that. You can see now we'll import it there, and our test should build at least, but it should fail. And it does, because we're not throwing anything. So we're going to use that syntax that we were talking about earlier, that sort of the null coalescing syntax there, and get from it'll either assign it, or if the GitHub service is null, we can throw new argument null exception, and we'll use the name of operator to pass along that string. Now we should see that test pass, hopefully. There we go, and we are on our way. All right, so what do we think? So now that's good. We know that we're taking in a GitHub service in the constructor. That's great. And so now what we want to kind of figure out is, okay, so what are we saying is happening with the cached GitHub service? Hey, bye Kev, thanks for joining the stream. I really appreciate it. Great to see you around here. I hope to pop into yours sometime soon. Thanks. So the with this cached GitHub service, what are we trying to do with it? When I think about it, what we're actually trying to do, right, is we're trying to call the GitHub, the underlying GitHub service, only once. So I want to verify a couple of things. Let's think about the kind of tests we want to write. So I'll kind of create some failing tests here as a sort of to-do list. So first off, in fact, before we do that, we're at a spot where we've got one passing test. Let's go ahead and commit that and just get a quick work in progress pull request going. Okay, so basic test class and ctor constructor tests. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll publish that branch. That's that control R. Open a new pull request. All right, so we'll say work in progress, add caching for GitHub repository list. All right, great. And then we'll say this is going to resolve. When it's done, it'll resolve 29. Right now, it's work in progress. We'll go ahead and create that pull request. And now we're back to it. Great. Okay. So let's now think about our cache GitHub service. So I wanted to adhere to the same methods that we have so far, which is really just the one of getting the repositories for an organization. So let's create a class for that test. I'm going to copy the name from our GitHub service here. Get repositories for organization async. So this is the class that we'll be testing in our cache GitHub repository, or the method that we'll be testing. I create a separate test class for that. And now, what do we want that to do? So we want to say, I think when called, we want to, it calls the underlying GitHub service. All right, so that's one thing we want it to do. And I'll it's a to-do list for us, so I'll have it fail with a not implemented exception for now. What's the next thing that we want it to do? We want it to want it called twice, or let's say when called multiple times, calls underlying GitHub service only once. So we should be able to use that cached information and still get that back. So we'll also probably want to verify that when called multiple times, still gets full repository list. All right, so we want to verify, one, that our information is correct, that we're getting from underlying service. So we want to verify that this is, that when we call the actual underlying service, we're still getting the correct response, and we want to verify we're really only making that call once. All right, that seems reasonable. So let's start there. Okay, so what we want to say is var suc equals new cached GitHub service, and we're gonna have to pass something into that, right? So let's think about that. Let's go ahead and say var mock service equals new mock of an iGitHub service. We'll add our reference to mock, and we'll pass in that mock service. Why not? Okay, so what we want to say is when called, so we're saying set dot, and I think what we're saying is we want to call the method that will be called this, get repositories for organization async. All right, which doesn't exist in our cached service yet. Okay, and then we want to verify that it has called that underlying mock. So mock service, we want to verify that that was called, and we want to verify that it was called times once. All right, so we want to verify that. Now this isn't building because of course we don't have the method that exists yet. That's totally fine. So let's go ahead and create that method now. All right, and remember we want it to have the same signature as the get repositories for organization async. So we'll do that. So we'll have the same signature there. Okay. And then what we want to do is we want to say we have our GitHub service here. We want to say var result equals await the underlying GitHub service. Right, so we'll call that. So it's a task there. And then for now, that should be good, right? So for now, we should be able to return the result. All right, so for now, that's got the test passing here, right? So we verified, okay, when we call it, we'll go ahead and await this as Resharper is smartly telling us to do. So we'll convert that to an async task instead of a void, and we'll await that because it is an async method. Great. Okay, so we are awaiting that. Fantastic. And now we'll go on to our next set of tests, right? So we've done the minimum that we need to do to get that test to pass. We'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's go back to our tests here. our next test, when called multiple times, still gets the repository list from the underlying service. All right, so it sounds like, one, we're going to have some setup here that we're going to need to extract out, so I'm going to get ahead of that. We'll do our setup here in the constructor for our test class. So we'll have a cache GitHub service, which I'm calling such, and we'll have our mock of iGitHub service, call it mock service. So I'm just refactoring now to go ahead and make this more accessible, so I don't have to repeat all of this stuff in each test, because I know we're going to do that, and I tend to jump ahead sometimes when we need to do that. All right, so we want, okay, set equal new cache GitHub service, passing in mock service dot object. Great. Okay, and now down here, go ahead and say update those. Verify that those tests still pass. Okay, those tests still pass. I'll leave a terrible commit message because that's what I do. All right. I'm going to go ahead and see if that. I'm using Pretzel for music here. I'm going to go ahead and see if that music is going to work a little bit better this time. Let's see what we got. Sorry, taking a break here for some music. All right. All right. We'll see if that holds up. All right, so next what we want to verify is that when the underlying service returns those items, actually we need another test first, don't we? It's called once it gets the correct items. So when called once, gets the full repository list from the underlying service. So we'll go ahead and say, we're going to set up the mock service so that when get repositories for organization async is called, it's going to return from results. And what we'll do is we'll say, we'll create some repositories here. I think repos, rules. And we'll use our own GitHub repos here. So we'll say new list of GitHub repo, which is our Poco class that we've created. All right. We'll go ahead and say new repo. Oh, and now see, this is very interesting. So we created a repo builder for our last one, a GitHub repository builder. That was for Octokit's repo, and so that we could use that in tests. But now we're actually working with our underlying repo, and I don't want to have to fill out all of these things each time. So we're probably going to create some sort of a builder class for this as well. Now in this case, I don't care so much, so we'll just go ahead and say. We'll create a builder here for that. Let's go ahead and do that. All right. So public class GitHub repo builder. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the builder pattern, it's a great way to use to be able to build up objects very easily with a fluent syntax, and then you'll construct them at the end. It's very helpful, I find, in testing when you want to construct data and you want your test to be nice and clean. So rather than doing this, we'll create something like this that has all these default values correct, and then we'll go from there. Let's just go ahead and say public void or public GitHub repo build is going to be the end result. So we know we'll have that. We'll say return new GitHub repo. And right now we're just going to have all default values. So we have to add some things to via our constructor. So repo ID, we're just going to do 0 string.empty 0 false 0. So we're just kind of like going through and doing some default values here. We'll do date time offset.now for those, why not? And basically I'm just going through and creating some dummy values here. All right. string empty for description, space private, okay, and then we'll, okay, so now we've got something that we can create with all the dummy values, and that's totally fine. I'm not so worried about it now. So now let's create a new, let's create a method here called withID. So public GitHub repo builder, right? We're going to return itself. Call it with ID, long ID. We'll have a private backing field here. Oops, so we'll set that based on the input. And then we'll make sure that we have here, we were passing along the ID. We'll go ahead and pass that along. Okay, and we'll return this. So now that's a builder pattern for you. And so right now, right, we've got a bunch of dummy stuff, but we can change the ID for the rest of it. So that's all we need so far. We'll say new GitHub repo builder dot with ID 1. And so that's going to create all those, it's going to add all of those values. So we'll go ahead and say with ID 1, 2. We'll add one last one for an ID of 1, 2, 3. So what we're going to say is make sure that we actually get those back here. Oops, sorry. All right, so now we've got our fake repositories, right? We want to make sure that it returns that list. All right, so now that's our underlying GitHub service is going to return that. So we want to make sure that we are pulling that back directly, essentially. So that result equals set dot, we'll call that, right? And then we should be able to assert that result should be equivalent to the fake repositories list. Now, go ahead and let that run. Okay. No tests are queued for execution, so I wonder why that didn't go ahead and run. Let's think about why. Okay, it's failing up here. Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Oh, that would help. It would be helpful if we initialize that object. We probably should, we can't just include the mock, we should also initialize it. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, now we're seeing expected result to be a collection, but it was a task. So we actually are going to go ahead and do the same thing here. We forgot to await it. So let's make this an async task. We'll go ahead and await this here. Now our test is passing because we forgot to await our async method. So we've got that covered now. And away we go. Those of you in the chat, I'd love to know a little bit more about where you're from and where you're, how you found the stream and sort of what your background is. So feel free to drop that in the chat as we go. Go ahead and commit this. Another test. All right, so now we verified that we were getting the repositories back from that underlying item. So now we want to say, I'll move this test below because I think it makes sense for us to do afterwards. Go ahead and do that. Okay. And so we've got, now our next step is when it's called multiple times, it still calls the underlying service only once. So we should be able to call this, we'll do it 3 times, why not? And we should still verify that it was only called once. Remember, so we still have that assertion there. Let's go ahead, we'll change this again to an async task. So this will pass, right, because we're only calling it once. All right, build is in progress. Something's failing again or not working here. See what's going on. Not sure why this is. Okay. Oh, not implement an exception. No. Oh, it's almost like it doesn't see the latest here. So let's go ahead and the build fail, perhaps. Let's do that. It's interesting. All right, there we go. So I just had to rerun it for some reason. Didn't get picked up. That's fine. So we've got, all right, invocation. We expected it to be once, but it was 3 times, right? So we're not caching anything right now. We're not currently doing anything along those lines. So let's go ahead and implement that. All right, cache GitHub service here. So we're bringing in the GitHub service here, but we're not storing the results anywhere, right? So even for now, we could do something like, we could just store an in-memory list here, so we could just say private list or whatever, but I don't quite like that. I like the idea of using a memory cache. So I'm going to go ahead and use memory cache. So I'm going to bring that in, but since I'm bringing that in, right, I want to stop myself because I'm now adding something to our constructor. So I'm going to go ahead and add another method here to my CTOR tests here. So we had with null GitHub service, there was an exception. So we're going to say with null memory cache throws an exception. All right. And so in this case, we're going to have a new mock of, oops, sorry. So now we have to update both of these, so it's going to be okay. So we'll have that, and then here with a null memory cache, and here we'll have a mock of the GitHub service, and then we'll have null. So that should throw, we want our error here to be memory based on the memory cache, right? So that's failing right now, of course, because that constructor only takes in 1 item. So now we'll go back and add in that iMemory cache. So now we're taking it in, but that should, it's still going to fail to build, which makes sense because we're still not doing anything there. Oh, we have to pass in the dot object on our mocks. Now I'm just trying to get to a spot where this is a failing tests. All right, it should fail because we're not throwing any exceptions, that's for sure. So still failing to build, that makes sense because we're not doing that over here. So let's go ahead and we'll update our setup method over here as well. Now we're actually wiring that stuff up correctly. We should see those tests fail. There we do. It doesn't throw the exception at all, right? So it fails, just that's how we expect it to be. All right. So we'll come back to our service here. We'll do the same thing that we did previously, where we'll say private and memory cache, memory cache. Alright, so we'll say memory cache equals memory cache, or new argument null exception, name of memory cache. Alright. So we should see that pass now this time. Alright, that test passes, so back to our other test at hand. So what we want to do here And we'll go ahead and we'll do some cleanup in a little bit. In fact, let's pause this. We'll say some more tests, because I'm all about terrible commit messages today, so we're just going to roll with it. All right. Okay, so here we go. Next up, we're going to verify. Okay, so we only wanted to call it once. So what we want to say here is I'm going to pass in a new memory cache and actually just create a brand new one in this case for our test. I mean, it'll be a slight integration test, but it probably makes more sense rather than trying to mock out everything about a memory cache. But we'll go ahead and see. We'll go ahead and see if that works out. Man, you know what? Actually, I'm going to turn off this music because I got to tell you, it. I thought it would help me focus, but with the headphones on, it's really in my head. It's really like makes it a little more difficult to concentrate. It kind of floods my thoughts a little bit. So I'm gonna pause that. If anybody wants the music back on, let me know. Maybe I'll put it down a little lower or something like that. Okay. So when I call GitHub repositories, what I want to do is I want to say if memory cache dot try get value, and I'm gonna we'll behind the scenes here we'll use a key here. We'll use a constant string repo cache key equals repo list. Sure. So I have that constant there. Put it up top. Alright, so if we try to get the value, it'll be a list of GitHub repo. Oh, actually, you know what? I think there's something I can do here with the memory cache here. Get or create. That's what I love. So we're going to either get something from the memory cache or create it, and we'll figure out how to make this work with the rest of it. So let's go ahead. Memory cache get or create. The object key is going to be the repo cache key, and the item is going to be, if it doesn't exist, is going to be, oh sorry, it's going to be an iMemory cache of list of GitHub repo. I think I can do that. Oh, the interface does not have type parameters. Sorry about that. Okay. So what we have here that we can do is the idea of adding an entry and saying get the entry.value. So I get or create, and this is where my memory is failing me a little bit on memory caching. I'm going to pop over to the Google again. Memory cache get or create async. I'm going to bring that over here. Let's take a look at that. You know, with this kind of stuff, I always find it helpful to go back to the sources. You know, we could look at the trying to do it ourselves and bang our head against the wall, and that's fine. But you know, smart people like Rick Anderson and Steve Smith have already contributed to articles, so I don't have to hold up my memory. And so we're going to go ahead and look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and create async. All right. So what we want to do is we can say, okay, cache key is that entry. The entry, we're going to set the expiration. Okay. And we're going to return the actual entry. Okay, that makes sense. We're going to set the actual stuff, and we're going to go ahead and return the entry. Okay, that makes sense. So let's go ahead and let's set some things here. So gets or sets the value of the cache entry, and we're going to go ahead. We don't want to set a slot for now. We'll set an absolute expiration relative to now equals time span, we'll do from days 1. Oops, hit F1 instead. We'll do time span from days 1. Right, so we want it to expire in a day. We want to go ahead and double check. We want to do an out, I think it's an out param, right? Okay, so var cache entry equals, we'll return that list here. Going to create async. So we're going to want to say, I think we need to say async here. Specify that so that we can await it. Okay. So the cache entry here is a task of list of GitHub repo. That seems fine to me. So it's either going to get it or it's going to set it, right? And either way, we'll have our cache entry at the end there. And so we should be able to say return cache entry. Now what's going on with here? So we see type. Okay. Repositories for organization. So we're awaiting that. So maybe we should be returning await cache entry. Okay, so we're getting the cache entry, which is a task there, and then we're going to go ahead and await that. Right now we're going to get an error from our mock, right, because we're trying to set something going on here about this entry, and so it's not going to work for us because we're just using a mock. So let's go ahead and look at what's going on there. Okay. So we had a lot of tests failing. Let's go ahead and think through this. All right. So let's go back to our basics here. Oops, sorry. We'll go back to our cache GitHub service test. Let's go back to our basics and see which things are. When called, calls the underlying GitHub service. So that's right. We're just using our basic mock memory cache, so that's important, right? Because we don't want to call something that right now is null, so we don't know what's going on there. So let's go ahead and set up our memory cache. Right. So try get value with it dot is any string. This is the key, right? So it is any string. Whenever I pass in the string in my tests, whenever I what I'm using here. So whenever, actually what I don't want to do try get, it's really whenever I want get or create async is called. So whenever get or create async is called with it dot is any string, and it dot is any it dot is any func of I'm gonna double check that. It dot is any func of I cache entry comma task t item. Task of list of GitHub repo. I think that's right. Does any? Okay, so whenever that's called, we want to return task.from result. We'll just return an empty list for now. This just ensures we can call the darn thing. Okay. All right, so what's going on here? run that test. Okay. So I'm getting to that part. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. Ah, okay. Extension methods may not be used in setup and verification expressions. Okay. So let's see what we're going to do here. Well, we're calling it in a certain way, so let's see. So I thought we could use this. We can't call. Okay. So really, all I'm trying to do here is set up this get or create async. Oh man, it's been a second since I figured out how to mock this out. I'm trying to remember where I've done this last. Okay. All right, so maybe we will want to make use of like try get value, and we'll want to make use of the get. You know, we'll probably try and do that kind of stuff. But also, I think that we may. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking off to my browser here for support. For those of you on the chat, if you've done this sort of thing before with memory caching, I'm always up for hearing about how you've solved it. I'm just trying to remember this. I've definitely done it before on many moons ago. I'm double checking something here. So we could so maybe let's not worry about that. Let's do this instead. Instead of get or create async and being fancy, let's make it a little basic. So we'll say if memory cache dot try get value and we'll say list of GitHub repo list. So we'll say out repo list. So if it has that value, if it's able to get that value, we'll say return repo list. Otherwise, repo list equals, we'll call the underlying service. We will await it, and we will say memory cache dot create entry repo cache key dot value equals repo list, and then we will return the list. That should do it, I think. So let's go ahead and see what we got going on here. So we'll have to do some setup still. So we're going to be very specifically calling try get value, and we're going to be calling create entry as well. So we're going to have to mock those things out. So let's go back to this. Setup, recache, .setup. This is fun. I always, honestly, it's been so long since I've been trying to do this that I have gotten that. So we'll say is any string and out. List of repo dummy list here. Can we say, I don't know if we can do a dot is any object here. Get dot is any list. GitHub repo. Out argument must be assignable variable value. Okay. Double check real quick. Mock out value. Let's put a minute. And, and this is, again, just it goes to show that, I literally teach classes on this stuff. You forget the syntax. It's not the easiest thing that you can do. So we'll go ahead and see what we can do here. Let's see. Set up it.ref, not it.isAny. So it.ref. It.ref. List of GitHub repo. Dot any. Oops. What is it? Dot ref. Int. Or dot ref this value. Dot is any. Don't mind my keyboard shortcuts taking over the world there. Okay. So now we've got that. So the memory cache, whenever it calls try to get value, we're going to return. For right now, we'll return a new list of we'll say it returns true. Right, so try get value is going to always return true, like it has a value in there. Let's see what's failing now. It's not setting it up right. Let's see. Cache extensions dot try get value may not be used in setup. Okay, so let's see what we can use. So this is where I take a step back and say, am I approaching this the wrong way? Do we need to be mocking the memory cache at this point? Should we just use a new memory cache itself? I guess we do still want to mock it because we still want to know that it's been called, that the other thing hasn't been called. Actually, no, that's not true. We have our other mock, and so let's just use a memory cache. Like it's one of those things where I don't need to mock it out. Not worried about it. So we'll create a new memory cache. Why not? It doesn't, you know. This is where I'm not so dogmatic about unit testing and integration testing. Like, yeah, technically this makes an integration test, but it's literally a memory cache. It's going to be fine. We'll do new memory cache and new memory cache options, right? So we'll pass that in. Not going to worry about the setup there. We'll pass in the memory cache. Because we're not verifying that the cache is called or how it's called or what we're doing. We're really only verifying that it actually makes the call to the other service. Okay, so we got to keep that in mind. So when called multiple times, calls the underlying GitHub service only once. We can see here that we're not only calling it once, we are calling it 3 times. So let's go figure out what's going on with that. All right, in our cache GitHub service, we're calling into that. We are, if the